Democratic Congressman Marc Veasey of Fort Worth, thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Hey, great to see you.
Good to see you. And so let's start with the protests, some of them violent, that we have seen against Trump's policies as it relates to mass deportations and against ICE. Where are you on all these?
Yeah, let me first give everybody some perspective because there's been a lot of misinformation coming from the White House. The city of Los Angeles, and I have a lot of relatives that live in Los Angeles, and they have relatives that work in LAPD, LA County Sheriff's Department. The city of Los Angeles is around 500 square miles. What was happening within this very small radius of 1 square mile did not require the intervention of the National Guard, according to the governor and the mayor. And this is the showdown that Trump has been wanting for a long time. He knew that when he was going to do more controversial things that would, like, for instance, wreck our economy with these tariffs, that he needed to have something like immigration that he could go to for backup. And that's what this is. This is all about, is trying to give his base some of the more red meat, some of the more controversial agendas in his presidency around immigration and wokeness and that sort of thing. And it gives him cover for the really catastrophic things that he's doing around our economy, like with these tariffs.
And so, what do you say to people who may be watching, Republicans who say, sounds like the congressman may be minimizing, some of the videos that we've seen where, there's violence, there's looting, etc.
Oh, I'm certainly not for any of that. I'm against that. I think that the lunatics that are out there doing that and throwing things at law enforcement vehicles, obviously they need to be arrested. They need to be prosecuted. They don't need to be pardoned like J6ers. They need to be put in jail and held accountable for their recklessness and their lawlessness. So I absolutely do not support that. I also think that that they didn't need to call in the guard. The last time the guard was called in without the request of a state's sitting governor was during the civil rights movement, when the KKK and racist people were spitting and beating up Black people, throwing bricks at them, like literally putting people's lives in danger. That was the last time that the guard was called up without the request from a sitting governor. And I just don't think that this rises to the times of MLK and John Lewis. I think that that's ridiculous that Trump would do that. But of course, he's doing this to create a showdown. At the same time, I want to remind everybody that one of the terms that Republicans like to use a lot, sanctuary cities. Trump basically admitted to creating sanctuary cities in Truth Social today. He said that he's going to back off of doing raids in places like agriculture centers and farms, oil and gas areas, like in places like West Texas, to create some sort of a sanctuary city in these places. And so, now, I mean, if you're watching what's unfolding in LA, you have to be thinking to yourself, especially if you're a conservative, I thought that this was about making deporting people that were here illegally. But it sounds like that, depending on who's lining Trump's pockets, certain sectors of this economy are going to get a break. Certain geographical sectors of this economy, like where Kristi Noem is, where most of the agriculture workers in her state are here undocumented, that people like that are going to get a pass, and that places like South Dakota will become sanctuary states and sanctuary rural communities.
I wanted to ask you about Governor Abbott deploying more than 5,000 Texas National Guard and more than 2,000 Texas DPS troopers to the cities that have these planned protests this weekend here in Texas.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Governor Abbott's. I doubt that the guard is needed. I anticipate all of the protests here in the Dallas area to be completely peaceful, and for these protests to be peaceful. Abbott is probably also thinking that this foolish president that we have will call in the guard for him and nationalize the guard if Abbott doesn't call them in. So, not here to defend Abbott at all. But if you're Greg Abbott and you're sitting in office, you got to be thinking to yourself, man, is this clown going to call in and nationalize the Texas Guard if I don't do it? So it kind of puts Greg Abbott in an interesting situation. But I really wish that the governor would actually stand up to Trump and say, "Hey, man, what you're doing is wrong. You've gone too far once again." And to put an end of all of this. But Greg Abbott has certainly been one of these people that has sort of fed this monster known as President Donald Trump. And so now he's getting a taste of his own medicine. And so, I think it puts Abbott in a weird situation. But I don't think my personal opinion is that the protests are going to be peaceful and that the Texas Guard is not needed.
Another headline that we've seen involving Texas this past week is a New York Times report that says President Trump wants Governor Abbott to call a special session to redraw congressional districts in Texas to make them more advantageous to Republicans before next year's elections. What have you heard about this, and what's your reaction?
What I've heard about this is basically what you just said. Even a lot of my Republican colleagues don't know much about this. I know they're supposed to meet and talk about this. I mean, if the courts don't demand a redraw, to me, it seems very communistic. I mean, it seems very much in line with this parade that he's trying to do this weekend, where when these strongman communist dictator-like leaders, when something is not going their way or when an election is not going their way, they start arresting people. They start changing the rules of the election so they can get reelected for the 50th time in a row. And to me, it seems like that Trump is trying to just basically take what we've built in America, what our founding fathers have built in America, where we do reapportionment every 10 years. And he's trying to change those rules that have been in place since the beginning of this republic, since the late 1700s. And he's trying to manipulate it in order for political gain. And so I think that it's wrong. I think that it's absolutely nuts. But a lot of the things that Trump is doing now, I never thought I would see it in this country. And so he never stops surprising me when it comes to his delivery in the category of being nuts and just absolutely crazy.
If this does take place, and what dangers do you think there are as far as political dangers to Democrats if these congressional districts are redrawn to favor Republicans?
I think that there would be a lot of danger to Democratic incumbents and Republicans, to be quite frank. I think that you would see a lot of Republicans in much more competitive primaries. I think when you do something like this midterm and it's not really warranted to do, that a lot of these, sort of voices, these sort of far right voices that consider themselves, experts on the Constitution and the founding fathers, and you see them espousing their rhetoric on places like X, that you create a certain sense of uneasiness in that sort of population, and it's no telling who they would elect in a Republican primary if you were to sort of have this kind of redistricting take place, and it's not called for by some sort of court action. I think the other thing that would happen is that if you're going to try, I mean, Trump is suggesting that he wants up to 5 Republican seats. If you're going to do that, then you are going to create many more competitive Republican seats. And so right now, there are several Republicans that have relatively safe districts, and they would all of a sudden find themselves thrust into significant challenges in the general election, something that they weren't anticipating for, they haven't been planning for, and they would have to get ready for in a very short time period. And so I think that you would see very competitive elections on the Republican side in the primaries and in the general. And then I think on the Democratic side, obviously, you would see the erosion of voting rights and minority rights in this country. I know that there's one scheme that Trump is talking about where he would do reapportionment in Texas and only count people that are over the age of 18, for instance, right? Which would completely marginalize a lot of communities of color if you were to do that. And again, that's something that is not that was not asked for by the founding fathers and of this country when they wrote the Constitution. And so I would be adamantly opposed to that. But yeah, I mean that would be really bad for a minority constituency, something that I'm more concerned about, quite frankly, than Democratic politics. I mean, we've already seen Trump roll back a lot of the progress that we've made since segregation ended in this country. And voting rights is one of those gains that we made since segregation has ended in this country. And if Trump is allowed to go through with this, you're just going to see a lot of minority gains and as far as representation is concerned at all levels. Just go back to sort of a pre 1968 posture in this country, pre 1965 posture in this country, if some of these things continue to take place like this, unasked for mid decade reapportionment in Texas.
As you know, the U.S. Senate is now looking at the reconciliation bill approved by House Republicans, and the Congressional Budget Office is out with more insight into what President Trump calls his one big, beautiful bill. And it says that 7.8 million people will lose Medicaid coverage by 2034, and that the as far as the tax cuts, the bill's benefits increase steadily with income. So, what do you make of those headlines that are coming out of the CBO?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's something that we've been talking about for a long time. That there are going to be a lot of people that lose their coverage, both Medicaid recipients and individuals that are on the exchanges, and it's going to be detrimental, particularly to a state like Texas, where you have such a high percentage of residents that really do rely on Medicaid services in order for their coverage. We already have a very strained healthcare system here in the North Texas area. Our two county hospitals, both in Tarrant and in Dallas, are already overwhelmed. Our federally qualified health centers in both Dallas and Tarrant counties are overwhelmed. You have really high, what they call self-pay rates, particularly in the system here in Tarrant County. And it's going to be, detrimental. You're going to see mortality rates rise. And you're going to see a lot of people that voted for Trump, people from areas in your viewership that don't live in a district like mine that is much more Democratic, but they live in places like Northeast Tarrant County or Aledo or Weatherford or in Kaufman County or places in Denton County or Johnson County that were that were very much on the MAGA bandwagon, and they are literally going to see their health care coverage ripped right from up under them, and they're going to be in the same situation or worse than many of the constituents that I represent in places like Stop Six and Oak Cliff, and it is going to hurt.
And let me just ask you, because as it relates to the Medicaid cuts, the House Energy and Commerce Committee told me that according to the House budget, based on CBO scoring and projections, is still saying that the Medicaid growth is still going to grow by quite a bit of money in 2034. It's still going to grow by over 30% and by $1 trillion above inflation, even with all these cuts. So the Republicans have said that the growth that they're seeing under Medicaid is just unsustainable, and that people who are on it, people who are able-bodied and working, some states like California, I believe, have allowed people who aren't in the U.S. legally to be on there. And so, what do you say to that? They say the
Yeah,
Republicans have said they really want to focus on the pregnant women, the poor, the disabled that this program was designed for originally?
I would say that, first of all, there are a lot of nuances in that I don't think that the Republicans are explaining to people on purpose. And the biggest thing that I would say is that, someone that's pregnant would need to verify probably more than once during the pregnancy that they're actually, pregnant. And that's the sort of thing that is going to end up through attrition, kicking people off of the rolls. And we can look no further in North Texas than our friends just a few hours to the north of us in Arkansas. In Arkansas, when they put these what they call work requirements in place, it ended up being a disaster for that state. It created a healthcare calamity where you saw thousands and thousands of people lose their coverage and never regain it because it was, so rigorous and really punitive to a lot of low income families. And again, all that's going to do is just put extra strain and burden on our local county hospitals, on our FQHCs. And what it's also going to do is exacerbate poor healthcare outcomes because people won't go to the doctor anymore because they won't have a practitioner. They'll go and get all of their needs through the emergency room. And so instead of going to get checkups, instead of doing preventive care, instead of doing those sorts of things, they are literally going to end up just not being treated. And so I'm very concerned about that. I think that it's going to look a lot more like Arkansas. I don't think that you're going to see the numbers grow. I think that you're probably going to see 16 million people lose their health care. And it's going to be through, again, a lot of the attrition and people just becoming frustrated because this is something they're going to have to do over and over and over again to prove that they are Medicaid eligible through these work requirements, and they're going to lose their health care. I think that that's literally what it's going to come down to. And I want to remind everyone, too, because the whole able-bodied or narrative, doesn't really give an accurate picture of who's on Medicaid. Most of the people that are on Medicaid are already working. They're people that are poor, they're low income, and they're on Medicaid, and they're out there busting their butt for North Texas. They're busting their butt for Texas and America and a lot of really tough jobs that just don't have adequate health care coverage and they don't make enough money. And so they need Medicaid in order to be able to take care of their families. And a lot of those individuals, they're just not going to have the time or understand the rules in order to just be on this continual cycle that they have to, prove themselves over and over again just in order to stay eligible for Medicaid.
And with regards to the tax cuts, I know you and Democrats have said that this is really more for the billionaires than
Absolutely.
it is for the middle class. And I'm wondering, what would your solution be if you had an ideal bill that you and Democrats could pass? What would it include as far as tax cuts are concerned?
Probably would include a much smaller tax cut. I certainly believe that when we have an opportunity to cut taxes, that we should. And I'm not one of these, people that think that we ought to be, send out and met out extra punishment just because someone's been successful. That's not what I'm all about. I think that entrepreneurism and people that are wealthy in this country have created a lot of jobs. I just think that people need to pay their fair share, and so kicking people off of healthcare services so Elon can have a tax break is not what I'm all about. But doing it responsibly is something that I think that Democrats have the ability to do, and I wish that Republicans had reached out to us and asked, "Hey, why don't y'all sit down with us and let's come up with a rate that's going to work without having to, again, kick low income people off of Medicaid and lay off a bunch of veterans from our local government related jobs that are here in the North Texas area. We've had thousands of people laid off so they could, lower the amount of money that was being spent on the federal payrolls to help also pay for this tax cut. That was one of the things that they were doing when you saw these massive layoffs and these massive cuts to these government jobs, that they were looking for money to help pay for this $1 trillion+ tax cut for Elon. And so I think that's irresponsible, and I'm not for that. But I'm for sitting down and trying to work something out that makes a lot of sense. And I just don't think that this has any sense to it at all. I think it's crazy.
And I did want to ask you one other question, and that was this. I mean, the debt is 36, close to $37 trillion right now.
Right.
So what is the answer? I mean, doesn't spending have to be cut as part of this?
Yeah, spending absolutely has to be cut, but it needs to be done responsibly. I was a federal employee with GSA when I was in college under the student aid program, and at that time, Al Gore was tasked with what was known as reinventing government. And the way they reinvented government, and there were some people that didn't like it then. I can remember people in the building at Fritz G. Langham in downtown Fort Worth, in the Federal Depot there off of Felix and I-35 in Fort Worth. There were people there that didn't like that, but the way that Gore went about that task that President Clinton had him do was in a much more responsible and orderly way. And President Clinton actually balanced the budget. And so I am 110% about trying to do something about this out of control spending, this growing deficit. And I just want to remind everyone again, particularly for viewers in a lot of those red areas here in the North Texas area, that the biggest increases that we've seen in the deficit have been from Trump. And that's why you have seen members like Massey out of Kentucky, Thomas Massey, say they're not going to vote for this because all it's doing is running up the deficit. And so it's been Trump where we've seen the biggest increases in the deficit. We saw it during his first presidency. And if he's able to get this bill passed in its current form, then we're going to see him increase the deficit to even higher record numbers than they are now. And so people need to wrap their heads around the fact that the old Republican Party that used to talk about trying to decrease the deficit and try to stop this out of control spending, that Republican Party is gone. Under the new party of Trump, if he can give a tax cut to a bunch of people that live in rich gated communities and are billionaires like Elon Musk, he's going to do it if it means increasing the deficit. And he doesn't care about that old orthodoxy. He wants to do the cuts and he wants to run up deficit spending because he always wants to get his way.
All right, we will have to leave it there. Congressman Marc Veasey of Fort Worth, thank you so much. We
Thank
appreciate it.